Episode 51. This week we're continuing our conversation about Vic Braden, podcast number 51. Part 3 on Vic. Vic Braden's birthday today, August 2nd.
Final episode.
Man, the myth.
On the master.
Yep.
Start with the Vic Braden quote. The tennis court is a mistake center. Last podcast, I made a mistake, like I always do.
Never.
With Dumb and Dumber, just a thought on that, the title of the movie.
Yeah.
I very often say that it explains the situation in tennis. And it really comes to one of Vic's explanations. The individual takes a dumb lesson. Okay, we're not really saying that the teaching pro is dumb, but it's just a dumb lesson. The information just doesn't hold water. But actually, the consumer's dumber. I mean, they're paying for the lesson, but they just don't know. They don't have consumer knowledge. Vic used to say social economic functioning levels, that a lot of pros cannot afford their own lessons.
Very true. I just had that conversation the other day. It was like, well, and that's a tough one. Who do you cut out or who do you don't? And
you can replace money, but you can't replace time. So someone takes a dumb lesson to undo what's been done.
Yeah, the money's gone, but also the time, more important.
Also, a shout out to interns. I mentioned one in the last podcast, but I was talking to another one yesterday. And perhaps the intern, apprentice, whatever the name should be, good guy, student. And very often, the name game?
Oh, yeah, we don't have to do it.
Very often we hear this, is that teaching's mechanical, it won't work at a high level. We'll get into that. With one thing from the last podcast as well is when Vic left junior tennis at the Kramer Club, he did that with the idea to generate more money for his own funded research.
Yeah.
And I thought that was one thing too, that your telephone, does it really 10,000 frames? Your phone can.
Yeah, no, the other phone I have, 1,000 frames a second video. And from what I understood, when Vic was filming Jimmy Connors back in the 70s with Gideon, it was costing him $1,000 a stroke. And that may have been a combination between the video costing that much, the film, and Jimmy's time. But as I understand, it was the film. So things have changed a little bit.
Question, is there a next Vic Braden? In other words, is there anyone in tennis who's currently conducting research and is focused on making new discoveries that are based on physics and facts? And if not, why not? Why don't you start with that one?
Well, it's always tough to replace a person, right? We talk about one, we talk about our pillars, even one Welby Van Horn, one Vic Braden, one Dennis Vandermeer, the personality, the experiences, the history that they have, but the idea, someone teaching with, enthusiasm and a sense of humor and having the curiosity that Vic did to find answers. I think there's some out there that are trying that, but, the center that he had, there's so many things, his background, in tennis and sports, but that center, it's like I don't see too many of those happening anywhere in the world anymore. There are some academies that have, some things that are inclusive, but really the research, force plates in the ground, and not just tennis, 40 sports, and then someone like Gideon Ariel and his, we talk about that a little bit later, his machines and his software, all that in one place. I don't know if that's ever going to happen again.
Well, in the tennis field, research and practice are so greatly removed. Throughout academia, when someone completes a higher degree, and they their dissertation, their thesis. But I think once people get into the working world, where they go from an academic background to a clinical background, it pretty much stops in tennis. I do think, I was talking to a nurse the other day, the medical profession. And perhaps it's just with technology. It seems like they're always going back for continuing education.
Yeah. Practical application, right? I mean, so there's one thing to have all the research, but then to have been in the trenches for 30, 40 years and taking beginners to a national or pro level, that's different.
Well, and I think also, too, is getting everyone under the same roof. For years, when tennis was really big in the U.S., I ran a weekend workshop. We call it the elbow workshop, the tennis elbow workshop. At one point it was called Little League Arm, or It was not just from tennis, but so myself as a diagnostic coach, and then we had a PT, a physical therapist, an orthopedic surgeon. But many times, say just those three professionals are not working together. You have to go see one and see the other.
Right.
Not always, and it's from state to state. In some states, you can just go directly and see a physical therapist. But are they? It's like Tommy Haas. When one year he had the same operation on the same shoulder, and I don't think he was really told cause and effect.
Yeah.
The toss being way over his head. I mean, same thing like shortening the careers of Edberg and Patrick Rafter.
Yeah, we'll just give you a shot. We'll give you a little pill, make you feel a little better.
Yeah, what's
The cause.
just in injury prevention, but also too, I think really it begins and ends with who's winning, right from 10 and under tennis all the way up. You were showing me some film of Kyrgios earlier.
Yeah.
As to like a Jack Kramer, who had such a great influence over Braden. Can you imagine if he could volley?
Yeah.
Could if he could back that up with a 1-2 punch, where you could play a combination off of that. Some people say it's the best serve out there, but it doesn't come in behind it.
Yeah.
Here's another question: is there room for another pillar in the GreatBase curriculum? In other words, is there anyone in the tennis industry currently, whether from fitness perspective or mental perspective, who might be worth watching to see if they could be worthy of adding a pillar to the future? I think there's certainly many in the fitness area. It's amazing to me how many. It's like more fitness centers and Subways, more fitness centers and McDonald's. But why don't you answer that one?
Yeah, I think you always have to be open, right, to new learning. I think for someone to come in and be a game changer, they have to be just that. They really have to come in with some game changing information. Definitely, I told you this the other day, we can do the basic fitness stuff, which a lot of times I think is enough, just kind of the old school. Hey, you got to be able to run, jump rope, that kind of stuff. Be fit playing tennis as well. But I'm sure there's going to be some guys that come in with how to do a few things more efficiently. But, physics as far as hitting topspin, I don't see that. I don't see that changing, No, the equipment's gotten lighter and things like that, but unless they change the court dimensions,
right, a wheel
stuff's not going to change.
A wheel's still a wheel. You're not going to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
I think you have to look at every individual, say if it's a tennis teacher, tennis coach, the 4 areas of tennis: technical, tactical, physical, mental, emotional. Typically, people will teach what they're strong at. Their emphasis will be on, say, if they're a fitness guy, a fitness gal, that's what the emphasis is.
Mm-hmm.
But also, too, the type of work that you do. I think many times the third base coach, the kid or I should say the kid, I'm starting to sound like Jack Kramer, the kid.
Hey, kid.
You call it a 50-year-old
Yeah.
kid. They're the third base coach. They're trying to coach somebody who's already scored. They're not just not taking a beginner and going forward, but just think of all the players that we've worked with that have been sent to us where it's a redo. They've gone 5 or more years playing with no foundation.
Yeah.
It's as if they're getting better, getting worse.
Yeah.
Hitting zone. What's a hitting zone?
Yeah, well, on a ground stroke or a volley, you want an area right around the impact point where the strings are still aligned to the target. So in case your timing is early, you're still going to be good. So, on a volley, we'll say feel like you're swinging across a shelf or an ironing board, linear towards the target. So if you can have an area in there where the strings go forward a little bit, in case you're early, you're good. If you're late, there's nothing you can do. So it's really, you want a hitting zone in case your timing is early.
I've heard Vic call it an insurance plan. You can play the ball here, here, here.
Yeah.
Someone hits the ball fast, you're prepared. Someone hits the ball slow, you're prepared.
Mm-hmm.
About the width of one's shoulders, 18 to 20 inches, the time span about 75 milliseconds. This question, and we appreciate people having sent questions in. The time span of impact, that probably should have been asked before the hitting zone, but could you talk a little bit about that? How long the ball's on the strings?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the string a little bit, the tension, but generally, from what you see from the physicists, they'll say anywhere between 3 and 5 or 6 milliseconds. the ball dwells on the strings. Vic used to always say, if you just stick out your tongue really quick, that's about 100 milliseconds. So gives you an idea of how little the ball's on the strings. And he would say 50 to 70 for that sensation to reach your brain. So by the time you've felt the impact, the ball is long gone.
That's like the young person putting their finger on the stove, the message from the finger to the brain to say ouch.
Yeah.
With Vic used to hand out a survey. He wanted to know how many people would take electric shock. It wouldn't create any damage, any long-term effects. And then he kept a tally, like 72% said yes, they will take the electric shock.
If we could help you hit a topspin backhand, but all we had to do is give you a shock every time you didn't get below the ball, would you do it? Yeah, I'd do it.
Well, Vic said he also wanted to have this little gadget. Because every time somebody got their racket to go way below the ball down knee level, it just he'd push the button and say, "You are the greatest."
You're the greatest. Yeah.
But it'd be nice too. Is that anytime someone made the same mistake, like today, kids playing doubles. I mean, this is a Braden-ism. If you shift your head, you're legally blind. Your vision's blurred. Look straight ahead. If you're looking straight ahead and your opponent's rackets are up high, the ball is high. If the rackets are low, the ball is low.
The electric shock, it reminds me, and this is totally off subject, but it reminds me of Ghostbusters. The scene with Bill Murray when he's in there with the pretty girl and the guy, and they're doing the experiment, and he holds up a card with like a square or circle, and they have to guess, and she keeps guessing wrong, but he's like, oh, correct, and then the guy, when he guesses wrong, he gives him a little shock, so even there's one time where he gets it right, and he gets a shock.
That's an old movie.
It was fine. Anyway.
Great music for that movie.
If you haven't seen Ghostbusters out there, go watch it.
What is the loop? Define a loop.
High, low, high. So you start the racket up high, and you get speed from gravity. And you have, we talk about interrelationship of strokes and spins. You have some options with the racket starting high to play a conventional volley, a return, a drop shot with disguise. And then, obviously, you can still take a low ball starting the racket high, but you get the downswing to help create the upswing.
The loop, it may not be the best word. When you drink too many beers, you get looped. There's a loop around the city. In tennis, there's an exaggerated loop if the racket's up too high, modified loop.
But Vic used to always say there probably is too high, but he would say, if you have the racket up even higher, you just get more speed from gravity. It falls fast. You just don't want to go behind your back.
Years ago, the argument was, well, the beginner can't use a loop because it's continuous. It looks to be continuous when you look at high-level players because the ball comes so fast. It looks like their swing is one motion, but typically the swing is two parts. Keep the racket high, keep it higher longer, wait to use gravity, let the racket
slow
free fall.
To fast. I once talked about this with Joel Drucker. He's a friend of mine, a friend of ours, really into brain typing, but we were talking about the loop versus straight back, and he talked about, the timing, and I said, it's all timing. You have to time every ball, whether you take it back low or up high. It's all a motor program, but all the benefits to taking the racket up high are there.
I don't know Joel personally, but anybody who's well-read in tennis knows Joel, great writer.
Yeah.
But when I was on the phone once with Joel and you, I told him that I knew more about Jimmy Connors. Mm-hmm. He wrote the book...
he was up for the challenge.
Jimmy Connors Changed My Life, I think.
Yeah.
But because he was supposed to write a book about Jimmy, but it never came to fruition.
Yeah,
but he'd be fun to get on a podcast for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
The significance of injury prevention related to the Braden method. Well, let me let you take that. But the Braden method, remember, they could say it's not the Braden method. It's not humanized. It's a method of physical law.
Yeah.
Prevention of injury. What do you got?
No, he used to always talk about that. He said it's really egotistical for someone to say that they have their own method, because it's really just the method of science of Newton's laws. But yeah, you want to have the least amount of moving parts, the least amount of muscular effort to prevent injury. That's obviously tennis is a really repetitious sport, so that's the whole thing. I think that was really where he just wanted to find better ways, efficient ways to do things, so that people could prepare, as he would say, they'd have a long time to prepare for the 90 and over nationals. Tennis is a sport of a lifetime. So to be efficient.
James Priest, orthopedic surgeon. Vic, 5,000 surveys on tennis elbow. Then he worked with Robert Nerschel on tennis elbow. You basically want to use your larger body parts, You want to use your thighs. You want to use your shoulder. You want to make sure that you can get set to the ground if possible.
Yeah, and the kinetic chain, efficiently from the ground up.
Let me skip ahead with this one question. We'll stay on with questions. Towards the end of Vic's life, he was talking about the so-called modern forehand and hip injuries. Mm-hmm. You want to touch upon that?
Yeah, well, a couple things that bothered Vic, when he would see a lot of the open stance, and obviously we see that a lot. Last time we did a project actually with kids, teaching kids how to teach other kids. We did a project in the men in between shots was about 2.2 seconds, and the women was not far behind with 2.5 on average. So if you got 2.2 seconds between hits, you got to be pretty dynamic. So there's going to be open stance, but what bothered him is that, the center of gravity would always just be going or pulling off to the left so much that even when people could, step into the ball or hit a square stance or neutral stance, they wouldn't. So they had no option to go forward. And then his big point was, the players hitting off the back foot and rotating off that back leg was, pounding on the hip. And he would bring up Guga, how Guga had like 3 hip surgeries. Played that open stance off the back foot position a lot. So the risk for injury, with tennis in general, it's such a repetitious sport. And the forces that are involved and that are being created at the highest level is tough for the body to handle.
I tell people I think the speed of the ball because of the racket, it's had a lot to do with pickleball being so popular among older people. I do think that if older people are playing with a wooden racket, and I think that's a positive with the green dot. They were playing on the 60-foot court. But why don't you talk a little bit about the and again, people watch our content and they think that we only teach people to hit off the front foot. You've got to be able to hit open stance, semi-open stance, if you have a closed stance. But I think the research is it takes players about 0.8 of a second to recover off that, where it looks like they're throwing a discus on the forehand, the modern forehand.
Yeah.
And that equates into 8 feet going forward.
Yeah, another project we did with some kids where we'd have them start in a position, from an open stance position versus a square or a neutral stance position. And then they would just run to the net from those positions. And the kid that was in the square stance or neutral stance position would get about 10 feet further ahead. So that's the important part about that is it's the difference of you being halfway between the service line and the net, which is 10.5 feet, or at the service line. And so if you're only getting to the service line, you're going to get past cross court or you're going to play a low volley where you have to hit up defensively. So when you're wanting that option to go to the net, so important to be able to try to get your center of gravity head, step in, move through it if possible to get in good volley position. GVP.
The kid method, KID, keep it deep. Mm-hmm. Chrissy Everett, she hit deep. It looked like she was never running. With the depth that I used to love how Vic used to say, if you just feel your body segments twist on that front foot, you set anchor.
Yeah.
That's just like say Welby Van Horn, the anchor foot, but Vic would just say, stabilize, get set.
Well, that's what's tough. I mean, kids are watching YouTube, and adults. They're watching YouTube videos of practice, a lot of guys in practice, but they're really not using the legs like they do in match play. And then how dynamic the pro game is, like I said, 2.2, 2.5 seconds between hits. I mean, they're just, they're always going to be in dynamic or off-balance positions and just having to, survive, having to compete. But, fundamentally,
Vic would...
that's what you want to do.
And you use your hips properly. If you make that diagonal step, many times you have to. It's just, your hips are locked. Mm-hmm. But Vic used to take pennies on the court and have kids get set. That would be your plant foot and step straight ahead. So when you're moving across the baseline and you're going right, left, right with your steps, that final steps you go out like kids today. I did that just yesterday. I said, all right, how many people on a baseball team? And I just went one at a time, and we went like 9 players down, and then one said 9. And I said, okay, so let's start naming the 9 positions. Mm-hmm. And they were really guessing. There's a right field, there's left field. And we Americans learned so much by just knowing baseball. Even if you didn't play baseball, you knew baseball. So that expression, step out of the bucket.
Yeah.
Like baseball, you in softball, you can't step on home plates against the rules. But in tennis, you have to create your own home plate.
Yeah.
So footwork, if the footwork's bad, the number one cause for tennis elbow is obesity. You're always late. I always tell these skinny kids. But the elbow's a weak region.
Yeah.
With injuries, there's certainly the chance of people getting the detached retina when they're playing doubles and they look back. They got to just look forward. But other than, I'd say sprained ankles, at the lower levels, at the higher level, the ball, as you said, the ball's so fast, they are taking a pounding. The USPTA and PTR, we talked about those organizations. I believe the number is like 2 or 3 per year, very small number of how many people actually have to use the liability insurance, because tennis, it is pretty much like swim at your own risk.
Yeah.
Moving on here, kinetic chain. Vic used to go 1, 2, 3, 4. If you had a big backswing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because you want to have that, that way, as you maximize force.
4. Yeah.
That's like erotic on a serve, where when you generate the most force, that's when you want to be at impact, like pow. But why don't you go kinetic chain?
Yeah, basically from, we'd say ankle to knee, 6 parts. Ankle to knee, knee to hip, hip to shoulder, upper arm, so shoulder to elbow, forearm, or lower arm, and then hand. So the idea is to generate force by coiling and then uncoiling, and as you stop one link, the energy transfers to the next link until you get to your hand, basically at the end, and then obviously the racket will transfer. But the important parts, ground strokes, was really big about stopping the trunk, and when you stop the trunk on ground strokes, the racket goes 1.5 times faster than human muscle contracts, and on the serve it was 1.7 times, which is the stuff that he did with Howard Brody.
That term, muscling the ball.
Yeah,
the interaction of body parts accelerate.
Yeah, and so when you can, obviously you want to have your feet set, and like you said, just like really twisting the body and pushing off the ground. The ground reaction force. Throwing a medicine ball, we talk about that a lot, but it's not always possible at the highest level of the game, and that's what gets confusing. I was talking about this just the other day. I actually had a chance to play a little bit of golf, which was a treat. But you'll see kids where when they hit their forehand, they let if they're right-handed, their back foot kind of come through at the same time with their swing, because they see that with pros. But it's like, no, that's the angular momentum. That's the stuff that's just happening because of the forces involved. But I was saying, like, would you golf like this, where you would, bring your right foot through at the same time as a club head? It's like, no, you're gonna, same thing with baseball. You're gonna rotate the hips, from the ground up. You're not gonna have that right side come through at the same time as your swing.
Yeah, we have on these podcasts talked about having a BS detector, biomechanical terms, the $14 phrase, angular momentum. Mm-hmm. You want angular momentum to set the body, but then you really want to have linear momentum.
Yeah.
You want to have the racket going out to the target. That's the hitting zone.
Yeah, the translation.
But people will just throw, when they say, well, the game used to be linear and now it's angular. Mm-hmm. It's just...
It's both, and it's always been both.
And and it'll always will be. They're confusing people with some
jargon.
Yep. With deceleration, acceleration principles, touch upon that.
Yeah, I did briefly, but stop one link, then the next link goes fast, picks up the energy. So that's the idea, is to not have a break in that chain.
I'm sorry, it says here, give examples of the deceleration, acceleration.
Yeah,
principles.
so like a whip. Stopping your hand, the faster you stop your hand, then the energy transfers to the whip. But on the ground strokes, we talked about, so from the ground up, but then you stop the third link, which is the trunk, the upper body, then the arm will go 1.5 times faster on groundies, and then on the serve, it was 1.7. So we talked about, the left arm being a reactive break on the serve, stopping the trunk, and then the racket goes faster.
Years ago, I believe Dempsey, I don't remember his first name, but for the New Orleans Saints, he kicked the field goal 63 yards. I think he was number 63 too. And he had the record, but he used to kick straight on. And then up where I grew up in upstate New York in Ogdensburg, the Gogolak brothers, they came to the United States from Hungary. They both became field goal kickers. And people said, well, that's kind of a fluke. That'll never happen again.
Were they soccer players, right?
They're soccer players.
Yeah.
But I can remember Vic, he worked with so many athletes, but he had a field goal kicker in. And for the longest time, they thought they needed to just, if they're right,
Yeah.
if they're kicking with the right foot, they had to strengthen the right leg. But
Just
it was,
get my right leg jacked up.
but it was more, a matter of being able to really set and be strong with that left leg.
Yeah, strengthen the left leg, stop that quickly, and then right leg goes fast.
But I think, when someone breaks the brick in karate or they cast in fishing, there's just so many examples.
Yeah.
It's like Muhammad Ali, getting Ariel and Vic Braden got the phone call. Maybe we mentioned that already, where they were analyzing, did Sonny Liston take a dive? But we just tell people, if you just go like thumb down to thumb down, you feel the jolt.
Yeah.
That's where you get the toss way low out to the right. But anyway, they got the phone call and said, "Don't talk about the champ."
Yeah.
Who is this? Don't talk about the champ.
Yeah.
Who's calling? Don't talk about the champ. So they stopped talking about the champ. With Vic, you say we're at war with the wrist. Elaborate. One of our interns brought that up the other day. He said, well, again, coming back to, we teach old school, it's outdated, and everybody's so mechanical. You don't allow people to use the wrist. But if you'd comment on that with various strokes.
Well, there's the wrist, there'll be passive movements. Like, Vic would talk about the pre-stretch, what people now call lag and snap. But really, and I explain this every time I'm on the court, you do as well, that the tennis court from the baseline is less than 20 degrees wide. So the angle that the racket face has to change is less than 20 degrees. So, and every time you're off a degree, horizontally, the ball's going to go 16 inches different. So if you start, playing around with the wrist, you're going to miss wide pretty fast because there's just not enough room. There's not enough angle. So it's kind of like good luck. But so that's where you're at war with the wrist. You don't want to be wristy around the moment of truth. And when you slow pros down, that's what you see. We talked about the hitting zone, that they can get there efficiently or inefficiently. Sometimes we joke around, some swings look like a snake going into a hole. But really, at the impact point, they've got to do what it takes from a physics aspect to get it in the court with the speed, spin, and trajectory they want. And you can't be fiddling around with the wrist.
Well,
if you want to be consistent.
With going back to the kinetic chain, Agassi with his legs on ground strokes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody to this day is better than Agassi with off the ground.
So clean.
But this question goes, do you use the wrist more on the serve and overhead than you would on ground strokes?
Well, again, small passive movements. It's more of the forearm twisting at the end where people think wrist snap, right? Where the wrist isn't going to really fold forward. It's just the forearm turning out, forearm hand. But if you really slow things down, get those fancy words like radial or ulnar deviation, things like that, you'll see some passive movements, but that's just not anything that you have to teach. It'll just from the action reaction, there'll be very small movements, but you won't see a big fold. And Vic used to always joke around and just say, you could always spot the people that would try to do that because they'd have big hash marks on their shins, and you'd hear them yell out, "Ah!" When they hit their shins.
I've met a few adult players that actually you try not to laugh that they're wearing a shin pad.
Yeah, really?
Yeah,
I've never seen that.
But Oscar Wagner, one idea I think it's great from Oscar is to get people to toss ball in front and snap down. We just call it Elvis Presley on a skateboard, snap down.
Yep.
Because you do want to really hit up, but yeah, I do think that you want to promote the feeling of looseness more on the serve and overhead than you would on the forehand.
Yeah.
I think it's so important to be able to teach people to relax, let's say on the forehand side from the elbow. I think you're better off. Even like Nadal, when he drives through a forehand, he still brings the racket back up,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just his personal idiosyncrasy.
Like when he does the buggy whip.
Yeah.
Yeah, it goes way out before it comes
in the buggy
back
whip.
over his head,
That's what they called Newcomb's forehand. So it's not like it's anything new.
Yeah.
But more forehands come up over the shoulder than when they turn the racket over. Kids really need to have racket awareness. I mean, the strings don't lie.
Yeah.
I ask kids all the time when they miss in the net or wide, were you early or late? And they always go, late. No, you were early.
Exactly.
You were early.
You rolled that baby, and you were early, and it went in where you pointed the strings.
I think this is a simple answer, but again, I appreciate people listening to our podcast, and we'll mention something, but it's not clear. For clarity, what is a cherry picker when you're filming? What's that mean?
Yeah, from the bird's eye view, so the top down from a cherry picker.
So you just look up and see the little red
The
cherry.
red dot, yeah.
So camera's on. That's where you get the cherry.
It's kind of nice because you can see, you know, especially on the serve, you can see how the racket goes away from the back, the centrifugal force, and on ground strokes, you can see how far, you know, behind the body or not the racket goes, and you can see hitting zones. You know, you kind of see the whole radius of the swing that way.
Why was Vic opposed to the windshield wiper or the so-called modern forehand?
Well, a couple of reasons. One would be the dimensions of the court, knowing that, so swinging away from your target, you know, or the direction of the court. That's one. But then two, it goes back again to where, you know, really trying to pull the center of gravity to the left. It was tough to go to the net. You know, you used to talk about tennis is about intimidation, and that when you get your opponent hurt, they should hear your feet, you know, going. Can you hear that? I'm just doing it on my phone. Maybe you can hear that.
Nice
Kind
touch.
You like that little sound effect I'm doing? But you should hear them coming in. You know, Jack Kramer against Segura, right? Segura saying, you know, this is what it was like to play Jack. Was like, yeah, just get off of me.
Yeah, he's all over me.
He's all over him.
It's
so
like
that's what you want to do to people. And
so years ago, people used to talk about baseball. They would also in tennis. They talk about boxing, like boom, boom.
yeah, just keep coming at you.
It's like you punch someone once, go, did it hurt?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
it's actually their head snapping back and forth that knocks them out. It's the snap of the head. Terrible thing.
You know, those are, I think, two big reasons. Is again going back to the court, and then, you know, having the option to go forward.
I think, and you say this. I like the way you say this, where you can go through a forehand and go A, B, C, D, different parts.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest mistakes in tennis right now is people are mistaking the recovery as the follow through. Like Federer, why don't you just touch upon that quickly? How the racket goes out to the target. Isn't it 4.5 feet for the Fed on one side?
Well, the ABCD, I always tell, because people will say, you know, finish if A is where the racket starts forward, B is the hit, and then C, let's say, is the very end position. Let's say a player ends up where their hand is down by their left pocket if they're left-handed. So, okay, you know, the radius, it's going to go way out. So A, it starts forward, B is the hit in the hitting zone where it goes way out towards the court, and there's only so far you can go. You know, it goes out, way out, way out, and then because it's just a radius, it's going to come back down and to the left. But people just look at that, so then they try to go from A to C, and they forget about B. But, yeah, the three-dimensional studies, you know, where Vic and I did 9 years at Indian Wells. We did the Accurate Classic, the LA Open, different tournaments where we had 3 video cameras, stationary cameras on court, and then we digitized the players' bodies so you could quantify the movement. And that's where, like, Federer's forehand, we did Federer, it was, like a little over 4 feet where the racket, you know, once it started going forward, it would go way out. Now, the strings wouldn't point to the target that whole time, you know, like you said, 12 to 18 inches, the hitting zone where the strings are facing out towards the intended target. But just the fact that the racket's going out that far, right? So the linear part of the swing is through an alley. I was just showing a player this the other day, an Ohio State guy, where, you know, he's just using his forearm and he has got such a short hitting zone. So it's like, you know, he'd make one, miss one, make one, miss one. So just showing, hey, that, you know, here's Federer, you know, over 4 feet. So see if you can reach your swing through an alley, and that'll give you the feeling of how far out the racket should go before it ever starts to come off to the left.
Years and years ago, people would say, pretend you're hitting 3 tennis balls. Pretend that, well, actually, they didn't even say pretend. You know, keep the ball in your strings as long as possible. But then it came out that you can't really keep the ball in your strings.
Well, for some reason, I mean, and obviously, this is where it gets confusing because at the top level, there's so much improvisation in times where a player may have to they can only use their forearm to make the shot, or they got to get it up and down. But, you know, for your basic fundamentals, for your basic forehand drive, you want to have a hitting zone.
And again, some of these questions, I appreciate all the people listening to the previous sessions on Vic 1 and 2. Maybe I should take this one. Vic's Vacant Lot. Elaborate upon that. It was a short-lived TV series. I had a yellow Ford van, had 2 white stripes down the middle, like a tennis ball. Yeah. And cool. Every time they opened up the show, my van was it didn't hit the editing floor, but
We should put a picture up on Instagram or Facebook of the van. Maybe we have it in the past, but we'll do it again.
remember Vic was ABD, all but dissertation. He wanted to prove that you could help a kid more on the field, on the court, in the playground than you could in an office or the psychologist's couch. So I was just trying to relate to a kid, and it's I know I'm the youngest of six, the youngest of four, three older brothers, and many times Sandlot sports there was no coach, no adult. You're playing pickup football, and
Yeah.
I was the last one picked, and odd man out. And, you can be the all-time center. You can hike. You can hike for both teams.
Don't pick Smith.
And that's where how to deal with that, and
Yeah.
it's you don't want to cross over where kids are being bullied, but now I think kids are really overprotected. How's it go? They're I think rightfully so.
Underprepared and overprotected.
Rightfully so, where parents overprotect their children.
Well, it's even too like if a kid falls, like when you fall, it's like, all right, yeah, I scraped my knee, I scraped my hand, I'm bleeding a little bit, and you're with your buddies, and you're kind of going, yeah, look, oh, I'm bleeding. And nowadays it seems like it's like, oh gosh, do you have any Bactine?
And maybe we go through this again fairly quickly. I know you covered myths in previous podcasts, but could you touch upon these 5? Staying down. Go ahead. Stay down.
Stay down. Yeah, when you stay down, you basically oppose your own swing. So if you're using, let's take a ground stroke. If you're unwinding the body from the ground up, whatever force you push off the ground is going to go back up through the body. So that's going to lift you off the ground a lot of times in the pros, because they're creating such a force. But if you stay down, so you have one force going down, one going up, you get the middle of those two forces, which engineers call the resultant. And so a lot of times it's a short ball or a shot in the net. And, some, like the USCA, for example, when the ball is hit really hard and deep and low, they call you need to absorb it. And there are emergency situations where maybe you don't have time to use the kinetic chain, the body, and really unwind and lift. And so they'll say absorbing. But when you do that, if you try to do that, then the acceleration rate goes down. So even though you may not be able to tell with the racket, but when they do things in the lab, that's what happens. So Vic talked about that a lot. In fact, we've put up a video that I think this was on Vic's backhand video where he gets into the roll of the legs and what happens when you stay down, the acceleration rate.
Yeah, there's a clip with a gal that we trained, maiden name Wilson, Aoife Wilson, teaches out in Northern Cal.
So he picks on her a little bit. She had a clean backhand too.
If you lift after the hit, the energy doesn't transfer in the shot. She changed that backhand when she was at Tennis Tech. All these connections with you do stay down with your eyes in your head. I think so you can avoid arguments. Say no, your coach is correct. You stay down, but you stay down with your eyes in your head.
Yeah.
Topspin's a downward motion. It's created with an upward motion in the body and racket.
And again, when we do the 3D stuff, and I know all the stuff that Vic did with Gideon back in the day as well, is it was really hard to find anybody's center of gravity that didn't go up. So even if you didn't see the leg completely straighten out, you'd see the center of gravity lifting with the hit.
High toss for more time. Sounds logical.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's good.
What do you think?
No. Yeah, I mean, what are some of the Vic lines? A high toss gives you
more time
to hit a crummy serve.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you toss the ball too high, it's really, you can't keep a continuous swing. So you have to have some kind of braking mechanism in there. And typically what you see is someone either has an elbow that's too high or an elbow that drops down low, or they have a hitch in their swing where the racket stops. And just, that doesn't make sense. If you're, making a circle and you go halfway, you stop, then you have to recruit the muscle violently to get it back going again. So it goes back to efficiency. Least amount of moving parts, least amount of muscular effort. Take
a survey, ask people what's more important, the toss or the swing, and they'll say toss every time.
Yeah.
Almost every time.
And, some of the physics, like Howard Brody, who I got to spend a little time around with, would talk, just on the basic, the science of it is that, hey, a dropping ball can help with a little bit of topspin production. But he doesn't take into fact, and he says this, hey, I'm not, that's, the tennis teachers, you got to decide. I'm not taking the fact of the timing issue or anything with the swing. And really in the end, I always tell people, well, racket head speed is what's going to help you get spin. So, it's not, I wouldn't rely on a toss that's dropping 6 feet to help you get more topspin. I would rely on having an efficient swing that goes fast to get spin.
Yeah, it's like Bobby Riggs. That's why he could beat people serving blindfolded.
Yeah, exactly.
The riddle,
hustle.
does the racket find the toss, or does the toss find the racket?
Yeah.
Howard Brody, he definitely classy guy. I enjoyed listening to him. He was over my head. He spent more time in the library than the locker room. But he was a professor for a long time at UPenn. And Vic considered him to be a mentor. I know you refer to one or two of his books all the time.
Yeah. Tennis
Archie,
Science for Tennis Players.
go ahead. I'm sorry. Say it again.
Tennis Science for Tennis Players is a great book.
Arching your back on the serve.
Yeah, you talk about that a lot. I think you probably explain that better than I do as far as, the rotation of the body. But you don't want to be arching the back way over your head for, let's say, for a topspin serve. Like a Stefan Edberg had some of that, and it's the force of coming out of that position, which is really bad for the lower back. So that's where you see a lot of lower back injuries.
Edberg didn't have a very good record against Connors. Basically, Edberg, he was so great at coming in, great volleys, but it's almost like he had 2 second serves. I mean, very, very good second serves.
Yeah.
But he didn't get a lot of free points. I do think it's deceiving because the players rotation starts from the ground up, and you really want to, turn the knee in. So if you're right hand, you really want to have that left hip pointing towards the net post to the right.
Yeah.
So it looks more like they're tossing the ball over their head, it looks like they're arching the back. And that's another myth too, which goes with that, is toss over your head.
Yeah.
Here's one: come over the ball. Come under the ball is a myth too, but this gentleman saying, and talk about why do commentators always say come over the ball.
Yeah, I think "come over the ball" as far as a phrase, especially used by commentators, has really just come to mean topspin. But that's where it can be deceiving if someone's not in the tennis know. The layperson is just, whoa, okay, I'll try to come over it, but the physicists again, the numbers vary. It depends on how hard you're hitting, where you are, how high the ball is, but plus or minus 5 degrees as far as being able to come over the ball. But really just, vertical racket face, very close to it, and you can't roll the racket over the strings for a point we already talked about, that the ball only sits on the strings 3 to 5 milliseconds, and that's just not long enough time to try to do that.
The racket head, the displacement, the movement of the racket head after the hit. When people hit topspin and they come from low to high, they don't hit the geometric center, so they hit the bottom part of the racket, and so the racket turns over.
Yeah.
So it's really aftershock. It's feel. They feel like they're coming over the ball. So it's like with underspin approaching the ball the other way.
Yeah. All the time I'd be with Vic, and he goes, well, another person said that they can come over the ball, and they've got the proof, they've got the evidence. And Vic would always say, all right, great, send me the film. And he would always say, and it never comes.
Yeah, I told the story where I asked my father, and he said, well, the ball would have to come up through the strings.
Yeah.
He was a civil engineer. Here's one. Why move through your approach shot if you get more power if you stop?
Well, I think proximity to the net. So it's like you're either going to try to get in great volley position and have angle and take away time and have a volley that's up higher, or you got to try to bang the ball and hurt somebody. The other thing is just keeping the racket head. When you move through it, if let's say, well, I guess an approach volley, if you stop, that can force the racket down, so to help keep the racket going forward. But proximity to the net would be the biggest thing for
one
me.
point I share, I went through the Spanish school a couple times, and they idolize Fed, but they had the numbers to say Fed would be better off playing more, and that would have helped him at Wimbledon this year if he played more conventional approach shots than swinging. Yeah. He actually made that comment on one particular point.
Like swinging volleys.
Swinging volley, because, again, you said it, proximity to the net.
Yeah.
But obviously you can generate more force if you, and I think it's just terminology. We actually call an approach shot where you're approaching the net like an airplane approaching the runway, but if you stop, we just call that a forcing shot.
Yeah. I think that's really becoming a lost art. Hingis did it quite a bit, even on her two-hander, moved through it. But most people nowadays, it's the hop step or left foot to left foot if you're right-handed, that kind of thing.
This is very quick. what do you mean the Vic Braden lanes look like a grapefruit? I needed to say it. It comes from Mark Hamlin. It's a grapefruit that's been cut. It's a half a grapefruit.
Yeah.
That someone is actually, you go to a restaurant and someone has prepared the grapefruit for you, because the geometric lanes look like a grapefruit from an aerial shot.
Top down, yeah.
If you could touch upon or elaborate the APAS system.
Yeah, the APAS system, gating aerial, stands for Aerial Performance Analysis System. And it's a sophisticated computer program that helps to quantify movement in animals or humans. And I really just kind of took it upon myself to learn the APAS system, which, wasn't easy. So I was able to spend time with Gideon Ariel out in Costa de Caza, and also someone that he's partnered with quite a bit, Bob Wainwright, who has a company called Kinetic Consultants, or he did. And he would oftentimes work with insurance companies to help them know if somebody was faking an injury or not. So, for example, like if someone were taking a real fall, if they were injured and they would fall, they can measure the center of gravity, like the rate, the acceleration rate, when it's real. But if someone was doing like a Pratt fall, they could tell if it was fake or not.
Dion
that
Krupe.
kind of stuff.
Dion Krupe, great coach out in Dallas. I love his line, IOD, injury of day. We have a few students that have done that in the past.
Yeah. But so the APAS, that was, again, fun project where Steve Simon out at the Indian Wells tournament let us put 3 stationary cameras on Stadium Court for 9 years. We filmed every match. I slept in my car several times in the field there. I was the last to leave and the first one to go there, but loved every minute of it. And, was able to get the footage to do the 3-dimensional studies. And, it takes a long time to manually digitize the joint centers, 3 different views, frame by frame. So it's, it's very time consuming, but then once you get the final product, looks kind of cool. It's a skeleton, but then you can quantify the movement. And that's where, it just helps. Like I remember one time teaching at the tennis college, a guy came in and he was going, well, the racket is just barely moving until almost the point of impact. And then you just, his word was kind of like, you just fire it through. And I'm going, well, let me just show you exactly how fast the racket's going at every point. And here it is, right here, it's the top of the swing, it's 6.2 miles an hour. And then right here, and then bottom of the swing, 5.5 times the square root of the height of the drop. Now the racket's here, it's 16, miles per hour. And then right here, it's 43. So I was able just to show him exactly the speed on each point. And I think that's where the research can help. Whereas it's like, hey, no, that's a myth. And then the practical application side and all the experiences you've had too with, the Welby Van Horns and the Dennis Vandermeers and group dynamics, all that, then, okay, how do you get someone to go from A to B? So
you take someone like Jack Groppel, Mark Kovacs, so Vic, he's a licensed psychologist, but he was what we say a self-made biomechanist. Groppel's in biomechanics. I think Mark has his PhD in another area, but Vic, because he knew tennis in the trenches, and I've met Mark several times. I don't really know Mark, but with Jack, certainly know Jack well. We both spoon-fed at the same time by Vic. Vic would have somebody turn on the forehand for the forehand or the backhand, and he would say, okay, don't swing until I say swing.
Yeah.
He'd wait, because people with nerves, they slowly let the racket go down.
Yeah.
You hold the racket higher, longer, and just wait to the last second. And that 3-point landing, the racket goes down, the body goes down, because you wanted, you said. I was coaching this kid, Ruben Perchek, and he came to live at Vic Braden Tennis College, and a lot of the staff members saying he's not going to like how high the racket is. And it was just the opposite.
Yeah, I was going, no, I like it.
If when you have time, you take the racket higher so you can generate racket speed. But most people take the racket too far back the other way. Then it's got to go back and forth. So say if someone swings 3 feet too far back, it's 6 feet of extra length and centrifugal force. That's where all the building blocks, it's amazing when you know this, you know that, and all the pieces of the puzzle come together.
Vic's line, so goes the backswing, so goes the rest of the swing. It starts on that horizontal.
Yeah, I like to tell it. I think it makes sense for kids when they say, remember when your parents took you to the park? If the swing was the swing set, if it was twisted on one side, it's going to be twisted on the other side.
No,
this is fun. I think you mentioned it, that someone asked, said they want more Vic Braden lines. So Here you go quickly. You will finish second in a field of two. Laugh and win was his motto.
Yeah.
But, if kids keep making the same mistakes, it's not that easy to keep laughing out there. But you have any comments on laugh and win? Great T-shirt.
No, great line, great T-shirt. He could definitely get people to laugh, that's for sure. He could definitely get people to win, that's for sure. But for him, licensed psychologists went into how the brain, perform the best or help the body perform the best. Is that when you're having fun, you're process oriented, just playing the game, where good decisions happen are in the front of the brain, the frontal cortex, and when you start, getting outcome oriented and ticked off at your doubles partner or whatever it may be, throwing your racket, that the front of the brain goes dark, and then the back of the brain where poor decisions are made and even balance is controlled, lights up. And so usually the performance
I like
goes
Agassi's
down.
Agassi's line. I mean, obviously, Hall of Famer, but he lost a few more matches to Sampras than he won. But he would say, "I was happy to be part of it." You got to enjoy competition.
Yeah.
Like winning's a bonus.
Yeah, you mentioned that Jimmy Connors quote often, right? The number one, the great part about tennis, number one is just to play tennis and win, and the second part is to play tennis and
Right.
lose.
The greatest thing in life is play
butchered
tennis
that,
and
yeah.
win. Second greatest thing in life is play tennis and lose.
Right.
That comes from Bobby Riggs, and no telling where Bobby got that.
Yeah.
Bobby. You just want to be in the game. You want to be able to play,
Yeah,
win or lose.
get in the arena.
Vic Braden, you'll have to call a cab to get to that ball. Another one, you move like a turtle with a broken leg.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
You'll be famous by Friday.
Yep.
You said one of your
Let me
favorites.
just really quick. What was great is there's a video out there on the internet. We put it up on Instagram where it's Richard Williams and Venus and Serena. They're like 7 and 8 years old, and he said, "We've been watching your tapes, learning from your tapes," and I think he mentioned Tennis Our Way, and he goes, "You say you'll be famous by Friday, but guess what, Vic? Your tapes are so good, we're good by Tuesday."
Yeah, actually, it goes a
That
little
was
back.
great.
It goes back a little further. Our Way was actually when Stan Smith and Arthur Ashe had retired,
Yeah.
and they came out to Dakota de Casa. But
Yeah.
it was Tennis for the Future. It was the title of his first book. That was the title of his first TV series. Fuzz Sandwich.
Yeah, give give him the fuzz sandwich. I love that.
These ones are along the same lines. You're going to beat your own serve to the net.
Yeah.
If you go to the net with your serve, it'll be like throwing up a hand grenade and running underneath it. This is a little bit deeper, a little touchy, where racket face is open. You'd say you're going to be dead in the water.
Yeah.
Because then you can't use gravity. You've got to recruit the muscles, and you're going to have a very short hitting zone. But that came from World War II when the soldiers were coming out of the PT boats and storming the beach, Normandy, and
Yeah.
you're going to be dead in the water. So
One that goes along with that, it used to say, you might as well just mail in the scores.
for $100,000 a week, Bjorn Borg, he goes deep and down the middle, sometimes cross court.
Yeah, that's the best.
With kids change the direction of the ball, and they don't play big targets.
Yeah.
If your partner can't serve, get a new partner. He would do that where you say, "What if it's my husband?"
Yeah. Yeah. Huh? Yeah.
Teaching tennis. When a kid buys an ice cream cone, he puts it in the middle of his forehead. You can teach the kid tennis. It's just going to take a little more time.
Yeah.
No one's going to cheat you to the bottom. Vic used to always use the term class. That's class. If somebody do something that was really nice, that's class.
I like that the cheat at the bottom. When you talk about hey, if you're at the bottom of the ladder, no one cheated you there. It's just because you're the worst. You got to work on your skills. You got to get better.
That kid's forehand. That kid, he won't find the court. He'll be lucky to find the bathroom. Vic is a comedian. He used the pronoun we.
Yeah.
This is what we do. I'm a toad. I'm teaching toads.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons that he was such a good comedian is, the top comedians, I think going back to Rodney Dangerfield, no one's probably better at making fun of himself.
Self-deprecation.
Bertha Finkenbaum in the Pismo Beach Closed. You got to read his books. Bertha,
Bertha.
I'm on a steady of low-cal donuts.
Steady diet of low-cal donuts.
Yeah, With
That's awesome.
we use this one to defend our positions very often. Vic Braden. Yeah, I just let my players loosen up after they win nationals.
Exactly.
People would say, well, you're teaching everybody to hit the ball one way. We'll get into that a little bit more.
Yeah.
I don't care if you shoot the ball from underneath your armpit. If it goes in, you're winning. Hit it that way. Learn to hit the same boring winner.
Mm-hmm.
Winning doesn't get boring.
Shucks, won again.
Confidence comes from winning. Winning comes from skill. Skills come from practice and know-how. People are listening to podcasts. They certainly have heard that a time or two.
Yeah.
Just cut, and Vic never swore, really. This is pretty strong for Vic. Just cut the crap and tell me how to hit it.
Yeah.
He once told me, won't mention the person, but he said, well, after listening to that person, now I have a pretty good idea. A person's talking about tennis, the science of tennis. Well, after listening to that person, now I have a pretty good idea what it's like in hell.
That's one of the best.
But he had a few different lines when he was not up on stage.
Yeah.
In the last podcast, comes back to a question. Steve talked about a few juniors, and I went through the names. And some of them are no longer juniors. They're just a couple of years out. Victor Lilov, Ashton Kruger, Patrick Gibson, Henry Squire. The girl I mentioned, Dario Garros.
Yeah. Remember Dario?
With, let's just go fast on an answer. Basically, I think of Ashton Kruger taught by Dave Anderson. Henry Squire's son, Father David, did so much with him, but Mark Hamlin. Mm-hmm. They brought Henry to me. I think of Dario Sheet was brought to me. Henry was, I think, 6 coming from Germany. Dario was 5. But they were all, I'd say, blessed with being taught the Braden background. Ashton Kruger.
Both German champions.
Ashton Kruger won the Orange Bowl twice. There's so much film. I remember Victor Lilov and Ashton Kruger playing each other out in Dallas. I took Victor out to Dallas, and they're, I think they were 11 years old. We have some of these things on film.
Yeah, Daria came out to see Vic.
But Daria, everybody has a story, and I remember when she unfortunately was, quit tennis at 17, and as a boyfriend, not to get into all the personal side of it, how good she was. Martine Hingis was, calling Daria. She talked to me, and she was staying at our place in Florida, and said, you can make money playing doubles. And she didn't grow up on the red clay, which is very unusual for a player growing up in Germany. Mm-hmm. But with, like Kruger, for example, she was just playing one up, one back doubles at Wimbledon.
Not the way she was trained.
And she was trained. It's just like, you and I watched Henry Squire play this year, and we had quite a few people watch him. Mm-hmm. I didn't see much of recently. Victor Lilov was in the Junior Wimbledon final. I had people sending me notes that charted matches, and that. I think that's something that's very, very important. Like say Patrick Gibson, Victor was around him quite a bit. He got to the Wimbledon semifinal, junior final. Mm-hmm. And, he's out there, young guy, trying to play pro tennis. He didn't really come to the net. Winning's confusing. We were told him to go in. Then he spent some time at Texas A&M one semester, and Steve Denton went through our training. And when we tell people they went through our training, that means they went through Vic Braden training. Mm. And so with the players, I think just for people listening is, start the course, stay the course. Certainly there's many, many chapters to a player's game, but it's like someone who's a musician and this is the song. They get better and better at playing that song, but the song doesn't change. Here's the forehand volley. Yeah. And this is the forehand volley. It's not like you recreate it from someone being a beginner to an advanced beginner.
Yeah, you're able to improvise, the better.
Oh yeah,
the better you get at it.
You're forced to. But again, those are just some players that all of it had success. Henry's 6'5", and he's playing one up, one back doubles. He's not on a green light point. He's not serving volleying, and he played at Wake Forest, and it's not. he's just there one semester, I think. I mean, with the pandemic, he wasn't there for much competitive play, and
Yeah, maybe.
you know, obviously, you know, it's not a shot at Wake Forest or you know what happened. I was with him at the U.S. Open. He played a kid from San Diego
Yeah,
who was at a
Nakashima.
climb, Nakashima,
Yeah, top 100 now.
and you know, Henry's forehand is completely different now than it was then. And we have all this film. His dad used to take him from Dusseldorf to Berlin, and I mean, it's really go back to basics. If people would listen to Federer, you know, he'll have a setback in a match, and he'll say, "Oh, I need to go back to basics." With like say Lillo, for example, is he now an all-court player? Is he an offensive baseliner? You know, certainly from surface to surface, from match to match. But I think it's really coming back to Braden is fact-based. And I think one thing to mention with all these players, it's not just technique, it's tactics.
Yeah,
You know, so,
because those are tied in.
I mean, yeah, I was talking to Dave Fish yesterday, and he's, you know, it's flattering. He says, well, your program, he knows it. I mean, the GreatBase, we were his curriculum at Harvard for 12 years, his camp. That So it's with Braden, it's not just strokes. And, you know, you asked me about his USTA, the United States Tennis Academy, with, you know, through Vandermeer. We talked about Bill Jacobson. One of Vandermeer's coaches, Eddie Parker, told me I was the dumbest guy in the world. He taught me how to use computer tennis. But, you know, our mentors, Braden and Vandermeer, others are just movers and shakers where, you know, go to the net. You know, Jacobson with stats. You know, and I think Craig O'Shaughnessy's doing a really good job to now. The article he has, The Big Lie. And so, you know, with having, you know, we started Victor Lillo, David Anderson with Kruger. Matt Clore spent so much time. I was just a supplemental coach, but I spent a lot of time with Gibson. As I mentioned, we have him hitting the ball left-handed. Henry Squire, you know, starting at age 6, but I mean, there's like say David Squire, he went with Mark when they took Daria out to see Vic.
Yeah, I was there.
And it's like, I mean, you just have to understand, just like in other sports, and I think that's a big problem, is that Tom Brady is still practicing the drop pass, the move back to be in the what it's called as a quarterback, just to be in the pocket.
Yeah.
He's doing the same thing his father taught him when he was in elementary school.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's a really, really big point in tennis.
Yeah, just keep working on your basics.
You know, so just yesterday, a young player we work with, Mason Vaughn from Texas and Anya Hamilton from Arkansas. They both spent quite a bit of time with us. They both won regional Little Mo's
Yeah.
the other day. You know, they got a big trophy, and now they get to go and play in a national where there's only 16 kids from around the country. And they both have been taught, you know, and granted there's many other influences as we talk about with our pillars, but they have been taught Braden information.
Yeah.
And, you know, they go to tournaments, our kids go to tournaments, and, you know, they stand out because they're the ones going to the net.
Yeah.
If you don't go to the net when you're 10, you're not going to go to the net when you're 11.
Well, people ask me quite often too, like, you know, why don't, you know, you guys work with all these players, or your players have a lot of success, and why don't, you know, why don't you market that? Why don't you put up the pictures on Instagram and things like that? And I don't know really what my answer is to that. You know, maybe we should do more of that. Maybe we've done a little bit of that, but
Well, people don't listen to science, logic, or imagery. They want to know who wins.
yeah.
And you know, I anti-marketing basically. You know, some people have I used to say that they have a warm-up that if they lose it, you could put it in the mail, and the mailman would find where you're living, you know, because they're just promoting.
Yeah.
Like say Alexander Zverev just won the Olympics. You know, you could take a player like that and say, okay, what about Braden information? And that guy's a great tennis player.
Yeah.
But he could lower his toss. He could have more net appearances.
Yep.
You know, what he does with his racket head on volleys. And the content, and it's not to be negative, but the content would be much better than what the public's receiving from commentators.
If we were just to talk about those things.
Well, Braden principles.
Yeah, we'll do that.
With, you know, here's something else. Like here in this country, Taylor Fritz is a great player. Tiafoe is a great player. And now Sebastian Korda. Grip, swing, body. What if somebody has a handle on Braden information? They're going to talk to you about Taylor Fritz's grips. or TFO's grip. Like I mentioned backhand last podcast, I meant to say his backhand volley.
Yeah.
Or his forehand, it's got some extra movements, but people aren't pressuring it. People aren't coming to the net and saying, hit it here, hit it here.
Yeah.
And I think all three of them are going to be millionaires if they aren't already.
Yeah.
Korda. But even Korda, if we started talking about Korda's serve, it's not your ego, my ego. It's really so much based on the Braden information.
No, exactly.
And it's fact-based.
Well, it's interesting too with when you watch, I don't know if interesting is the right word. I would say it's funny when you watch some pros that they, when they do like a tip video or something like a Taylor Fritz, there's these guys out there top court and, they get these pros come in to teach. And when they teach, we use the line often, top players don't say what they do or do what they say. And so when they're teaching and they go, yeah, and I really stay down on my forehand, and then you see them hit and you just see the body unwind and lift, or, I do this or this and, I come over the ball and then you see it and it's like, it doesn't come over the ball at all. That's a problem is that they're in positions of such power because of their notoriety, their fame, and, there's a lot of misinformation. So the person that doesn't know any better, they go out and try to do that, but they don't get the same result.
So this is during the time that I was at this college in Texas. So I have the semester off, and I find myself in both Florida and California. And I'm with Jack Groppel and Tom Gullickson. A side story is the ITF coaching conferences. They'd only allow 2 people from a country. Mm-hmm. And Groppel and I were both young. No one knew either one of us, basically. And it was in Delray Beach. We're in Boca. It's right up the street, and we're with Tim Gullickson. I said, hey, Tim, you got to come with us. He said, we walk in, and you're with us. We're in.
Yeah.
We can spend the day there. It's raining. Let's just go.
Yeah.
And sure enough, you walk in with a world-class tennis player, and it's like, Tim Gullickson's here.
Yeah.
but I remember spending time with Tim when he was with Vic, and Jack said, well, Tim, he told you to change your grip on volleys. He told you to change your grip on the backhand. And I was there. I said, no, he didn't do that. He did what was right. You give out the most efficient information. Ideally, this would be the best way to do it. Mm-hmm. But, you're in your early 30s, you're playing pro-level tennis. On the backhand grip, for example, if you don't change the grip, change the wrist, just turn your wrist down.
Yeah.
Instead of coming in and rolling it
yeah.
for that 3 to 6 millisecond hit. But the term comes up all the time is, and Vic was certainly systematic. I mean, a system is just an organized plan. Yes, we understand the dimensions of the court. Let's go to the next thing.
Yeah.
We understand all the ramifications with the grips. Mm-hmm. But to say, oh, they're cookie cutter, I think it is more difficult to work within someone's game. If you're working with a beginner, fair enough. Okay, we're working with your game. Even someone who's a freshman in college, I'd say, we talk about Tiley always is that, or often, with his success with the Braden method that he learned through us, that I remember him saying that because we ran this program called College Prep when the rule was you could take a postgraduate year just right after college, right after high school, and that 98% of young players when they go to college they should take a year off and really improve to get in that college setting.
Yeah. Well, that's the hard part about I've worked with a lot of pros that say they're between like 100 and 300. So to work within their game, it's tough too because you just go in the end you're going, God, your arm's still broken or you're still bleeding, metaphorically speaking. So it's like, man, I'm gonna try to set you to sail out on the ocean in your boat, and you're gonna hit the storm.
Yeah,
and you got holes in your boat, but I tried to patch them up a little bit. Where it's kind of like in the end, it's like, well,
it's like
take 6 months off and
it's
fix your boat.
It's like the thought with Kramer on Gabrielle Sabatini here. She's number 2 in the world.
Yeah.
But I do think a problem with college tennis, a lot of positives, but kid gets on campus, and maybe with the rule of playing so many weeks, they're there for just a few weeks in the fall, then they go off to a tournament. Mm. And there's really not much time for development. And if a kid can come in, he's got to, like say Rajiv Ram, he was 16 weeks at Illinois one semester, and obviously he's had a great career, but he could hit the backhand a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I heard him on a podcast say, if I knew I was going to play this long, and he would have stayed a little bit longer. But So he comes in, he wins team tournament, he wins doubles with Brian Wilson, and they'd say, hey kid, years ago the rules would have been that he wouldn't have been able to play. We mentioned Patrick Gibson. He only went to A&M for one semester. I think he would have been better off to, go the freshman year and go, I'm coming to the net. I'm going for it. I'm adding to my game.
Sure.
Here's a few more things to wind this down. Courier's backhand. The grip he uses with his left hand, the diagnostic explanation, the flaw, the cause, the cure. In my opinion, if Courier, who's on TV, if he was given a Braden explanation, because the angle of the racket faces this way, for every flaw, there's a counter flaw.
Yeah.
And that's why he had to pull outside in. Now, he hit a great backhand, but he basically became famous. And at one point, maybe he still is, his company, Inside Out.
Inside Out Forehand.
Where he gets away from it and he swings from the other side. But I think it'd be an explanation that he really hasn't heard spot on like that. Like, as much as he knows about tennis. I have heard him recently say, that he doesn't specialize in technique.
Yeah, I heard
Roddick's backhand. This is funny. Roddick's in the Hall of Fame. Courier's in the Hall of Fame. And during his speech, Roddick, self-deprecating, he says, I think I'm the worst player that's ever been inducted. But he goes, but I feel comfortable because Courier's sitting behind me, and he had a crappy backhand, just like me. But, like Braden lingo, Roddick, no loop, outside in, shortens the lever, no use of gravity. It's not synchronized with the body, like boom, boom, boom. And let's go through that. What do you mean not synchronized with the body? Well, the body's up, the racket's up. They go down together.
Yeah.
The shorter lever. Vic used to say, "You got the limbs of a little kid."
Yeah, T-Rex.
You're 6'3", but you might as well be 4'3".
Yeah.
Another thought: Djokovic's biography on page 17. His childhood coach, Yelena Jenka. I'm mispronouncing that. Jensic.
Go for it again. Try it again. What was it?
Yelena Jensic. Anyway, she says she was fortunate to buy, in particular, Vic Braden books when she lost early at Forest Hills. But no one spends more money on tennis coaching than Djokovic. But he changed his forehand. He changed his serve.
Yeah.
Nadal got beat one time by Djokovic 7 times in a row. And they asked Nadal, what's the difference? He goes, that's easy. He used to be 3 meters behind the baseline, and now he's just 1 meter behind the baseline.
Yeah.
But coming back to Braden information, what's he done with his toss? It's like with Silic. I heard Federer in an interview talking about Silic because he works with Ivan Isavic, and you got to guess that even Ivan Isavic just said serve like me.
Yeah,
because he had this. He had, everybody's arching their back and tossing out to the right, and he was just like, he wasn't a serve and volley. He was just a serve. I mean, the guy. I mean, he was such a great entertainer, Wimbledon champion. He's also in the Hall of Fame. He was just inducted, but Federer was saying, well, Silic, before he changed his serve.
Yeah.
And he wins the U.S. Open. He was a low and out to the right.
Yeah.
And I just don't think there's enough emphasis, and I don't think there's
people just don't see those changes.
Yeah, but then if people knew the history of tennis, like say for example, Don Budge changed his grip, Bill Tilden changed his grip. You go to someone like a Wielander who in '82 wins the French, but '88 he's got a totally different game, and he never won Wimbledon, but he won the Australian on grass. But in '88. The way he was playing.
Well, I had heard too that before even Isavic won Wimbledon, that his team they'd contacted Gideon, and Gideon had showed them where to put the toss exactly to help him. I mean, it was definitely low and to the left, but I think they did get some information from Gideon.
Oh, Gloria Connors did so much for her son Jimmy, and I'd love to read and learn more about Gloria Connors, but. I was fortunate to be around her, a couple different times, down in Boca Raton, Boca West, and so Jimmy started serving me better after he worked with Vic and Gideon. He goes, "Yeah, my mom's really helped me out."
Yeah, my mom really helped me.
The 12s, you want to talk about this? The 50-50 time span where the ball bounces, the kid goes back. Vic used to talk about that.
Vic used to always talk about when you take the ball on the rise, you basically cut your opponent's reaction time by 50%. So you're taking away time from them versus the ball coming up, reaching the apex, and then falling again. Yep. Sellis, Agassi, Connors, those players that are close to the baseline, take away time.
Selic was unorthodox with her ball striking, but Vic used to always say that she takes the ball so early. She was ferocious, and
Yeah.
at one point he used to say he had the proof that no one took the ball earlier than she did. There's a funny story about Courier. She's down, banging balls down at Bollettieri's, and he goes, "No, I don't want to play her. It won't be good for my confidence." But little kid tennis versus big kid tennis, people need to understand that. I do think you need to have that long-term vision. That's where Braden was. Where's this going?
Yeah.
It's a crisis. Some kids out there winning, but they're playing the wrong way. There's no future. Vic, there's no such thing as little strokes for little folks.
Yeah.
I came up with a concept, and that Vic loved it one time. It never became a reality. But they have a company called the Vic Braden Advisor.
Mm-hmm.
People work for three things: money, recognition, satisfaction. I mean, we had Vic's name on it, and he would have got a lion's share when it came to the money. I think that should still happen. I think that, our governing body of tennis, the USTA, I think they're spinning their wheels when it comes down to with what Braden already did. With Warren Vittoria's great guy, great mind. You were there. We were running a workshop. He was nice to come and make a presentation. And he basically, I have this on film, he basically said, with what he was doing with Dartfish at the time, he goes, basically what we're doing is what Vic Braden was doing 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Just the cameras were a little bit bigger.
Yeah. With whether it was a YMCA or a five-star hotel, in later years, Vic used to always tell me, yeah, we should have had a master plan. I one time was at Vic's place, a ski college near Aspen in Colorado, and I remember telling Vic, because Vic got away from teaching juniors, I said, you need to be at a place like Saddlebrook. So I was there for 2 weeks. So I get back to work on Monday, and Vic gives me a call, and he asked me if I can go to Saddlebrook with him on Tuesday or Wednesday, and I just couldn't go. But so Vic goes down, and Tom Dempsey, the owner, and that's where I said, Vic, you need to be where the pros are training. And one thing about Vic, if he got in the room with anybody, they would listen to him. But the thing is that he just a lot of times wasn't in the room, and because he could come at it from so many different angles.
Yeah.
And the thing is once again, he was in the trenches. He could actually get people to hit the ball better in just a couple minutes.
I remember a few people would, be a little bit combative, and it's fine to ask questions and to want to know more and, further clarification. But there's a couple of people that would be combative, and Vic was so good at just keeping his cool. The psychology would come in and how he handled himself with people, and then like you said, he had so much, his arsenal. He could just come at it from, motor learning and brain typing and all kinds of different
and humor
and humor, and people would just be like, okay, got it.
I actually have a story to end on, which was so out of character for Vic. It's just the opposite of how he handled it. But just a couple more things. In the end, players are not getting good information. The teachers, that's where it begins and ends. I mean, can you imagine teachers not knowing the alphabet? They don't know the multiplication tables. Yeah. And Braden on the internet, so much bad information is going out so fast.
Yeah, in fact, there was a question that I got, I think through Instagram, where someone asked that, what was Vic's thoughts on internet coaching, teaching, and that? Yeah, that was his line. So much information going out so fast.
So much bad information you think it would, but when the internet first came out, people didn't realize that it would just be self-promoted education. We're giving out free content, and tell Matt Clore all the time, he gets frustrated when people will come up to him and go, "Are you GreatBase?" Like it's a cult. We should every other month. They said, "No, this month we're calling ourselves Solid Fundamentals."
Yeah.
We were GreatBase last month. I mean, how could you argue with a young kid not having a great base? Again, so Vic's work is not outdated. It's not irrelevant. This is a strong comment, but a lot of people are two-faced. I talk to Danny Cooper often. He reminded me, I used to tell people, no, I'm not going to stab you in the back. I'm going to stab you right in the stomach. But people I know who said negative things about Vic's teaching, and then when Vic passed away, they wrote or they said some really nice things. A lot of things were written. But a motive, for us is the Vic Braden legacy, but they just carry a torch on what, Dave Fish, to shed a bright light on tennis instruction. That's what he said about the GreatBase. Vic Braden was so nice, so humble. This is a scene in New York City. It was kind of like Beatlemania. He was so popular. I mean, you have to remember he's on the cover of magazines, and he was on these talk shows, and he had his own TV show. And so we're waiting for a cab, and the crowd got to be pretty hostile. It was outside of the Roosevelt, and there's this one guy who was really belligerent, and he kept saying about Tony Traber, who's a classy guy, former number one from Cincinnati, but he was the voice of CBS. So he was coming. Tony was coming into everybody's living room, and Vic finally just told the guy, "I like Tony. Known him a long time. We're good friends. I forgot more about tennis than he knows." And
move on.
But that was not typical of Vic. But for me, I mean, all these years have gone by, but Vic Braden, it's like Warren Virtorius, 30 years ago. The number one problem with tennis, and for me, I think number two, number three, I mean, competition is, I think that's a problem where, kids are in the 5th grade and they're worried about their UTR and their tennis recruiting status, and they're not just playing matches. I know Dave Fish is very motivated to try to change that. He's a little disappointed that the UTR is not really a rating anymore. If you're you have somebody, what's your UTR? And they're saying, I'm at 12. Then it'd be a rating. If they're at 12.6, at 12.7, that's a ranking. And the UTR has done many great things. So competition, but instruction. If people were taught better, they would be a better chance of their staying with the game. But also, too, is it was just simplified. The Einstein, if you can, explain your subject to a 6-year-old, the forehand, it is not a merry-go-round. If it's a merry-go-round, the ball rotates like a Frisbee. If it goes like a Ferris wheel, it rotates like a bicycle tire. High, low, high, ready position, turn. It's not that complicated. But, one, I think anytime with Victor Kenneth Braden is thank you so much for what you've contributed to tennis. But I think that really in the end is, and anytime we have a podcast, it'll be certainly touched with Vic Braden information.
Yeah, we're always going to mention Vic pretty much every day.
I just saw a thing with the USPTA. Stan Smith is a class act. It was a 28-second promotion on going to the USPTA. And I've been a member 40-some years, or, 39, whatever, and was a tester. And Stan says, yeah, you get all these great ideas, and then you can go home, and I'll put it up on Facebook. You go home and
go to the conference.
Go to the conference, you get all these good ideas, and you go home, and you can just pretend they're yours. And I think that's
the problem.
Rocky 1, are you a pretender or you're a contender? I think too many times just begin with people are being pretentious, like they've developed all these players and they have all this experience taking a kid from A to B to C. But yeah, I think with Vic, humor and honesty. I mean, those are, Thomas Jefferson, come back to him, is, two characteristics that you want to have a human being have is integrity and humor.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really fitting that it's Vic's birthday today as we're doing this podcast, filming this podcast, recording it.
Yeah, I think the Jefferson thing, people, if they're listening to podcast 3 on Vic, they'd have to go back to podcast 1 and what JFK said about all these, great minds in one room. And he goes, well, this might be the greatest amount of, human intelligence ever gathered.
Yeah.
Except for when Jefferson was having breakfast alone, something like that. But yeah. Vic.
Vic is missed, and he was missed, as you said. So hopefully we can get more people to go back and rediscover.
Well, Andy, thank you. 51. We got one more to go, and hopefully this body of work. Hopefully some people have enjoyed our first year. We'll just review. Next week.
So I don't know. We've gone through probably 100 or so hours. So next week it'll probably just be like maybe 62 hours.
And then next year we're going to tell jokes and sing songs. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm going to play guitar. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to our third and final part on Vic Braden, our greatest mentor, friend, father figure.
Uncle Vic.
And hopefully you've enjoyed it and gotten a lot out of it. And we will see you in the next one. Thanks again for listening. Adios.
Amigos.